Hi, I'm Kevin Shin. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm a chef, but I used to be a pastor. And here's my story of how that happened. A lot of people ask me, how did I become a chef? And so included in that story has always included what I used to do before I'm a chef. And I tell them before I was a pastor for 18 years. I worked with college-age students, and a lot of people they say, wow, that's quite a change, isn't it? And, sort of. I tell them I'm still taking care of people, and I'm just doing it at the table, not in the church building. But I started out in 1988. I went to seminary in California because I really had a desire to help people feel taken care of, feel watched over, feel someone was shepherding them. And I had that natural instinct. So I was young and single and out of debt in 1988. And I decided, why not? Let's go do it. And so moved to California, where I then met my wife at the time. And we were there for 2 years and decided to move to Nebraska in 1990 to work with college kids at the University of Nebraska. And it was a great experience, and lots of learning, lots of growth, lots of new things. But it didn't take long until I started to question, am I in the right profession? I couldn't really put my finger on it at the time, but I had a lot of questions. And in 1994, I wrote in my journal this question that stuck with me for several years. I said, why are my best conversations with people in places of hospitality where there is food, alcohol, and music? Why not at a church gathering? Why not at a church building? And I was trying to be honest with myself. Why were my best conversations in these locales? And I pondered that question for 7 years. But soon after I penned the question in my journal, I met a man named Tom Sine, and he was speaking at a conference I was attending in 1995. And he was talking about this oncoming postmodern generation that no one knew anything about. And he drew an illustration on his whiteboard, and down in the lower left-hand corner, he drew a little box and a cross on top, looked like a church building. And he said, many of you in this room will find your best, most fulfilling and fruitful expression of faith inside this context. This is the church as we know it. And you need to go all in and serve in that capacity. Then he draws a line to the middle of the whiteboard, and he puts an underscore there, like a fill in the blank. He said, many of you in this room are called outside of that context into a place that's different, and you get to fill in the blank. This could be like, a parachurch or a business or faith-based organization. But he said, you're going to find your best expression of faith outside of this little box down here, and you need to go do that. Then the third, he drew an arrow up to the top right-hand corner to a question mark. And he said, now some of you in this room are called to go to a place you're not even sure can exist. And I knew immediately he was talking about me, but I didn't have the language yet to describe it. But I was taking that question, why were my best conversations with people in places of hospitality where there is food, alcohol, and music? And Sine began giving me permission to start thinking about that question mark. What is possible? What can happen? So I pondered this for 7 years, from 1994 to 2001. 9/11 hit, and it just wrecked my whole internal sense of order and certainty. And I did not really have good answers. And I'm the paid guy trying to provide comfort and direction to many, and I had nothing. So it got me thinking about this question again. Is it time for me to consider opening one of these places of hospitality? Well, it took another 3 years to say yes. And so in 2004, I decided I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to open my own restaurant and try to create a place of hospitality that matters. So I left my ministry job in 2005. Took another 2 years to get the restaurant open. And that was a very difficult 2 years. My father passed. My wife and I were both unemployed, but we had this dream that we were chasing down. And would I do it again? Yes, but it was incredibly difficult. But as soon as the restaurant opened, and we had customers, and we had feedback, and we had affirmation, I think maybe we did the right thing. Even though it was difficult, I could feel my creativity surging again. I could feel my faith open up again. And I realized then I had to leave the ministry to find my faith again. I had what my life was centered around, my faith centered around, and that all had to change so that I could find it again in a fresh new way. And I found I still was less certain, but it was much more settled in this new life. Because now I was no longer being a guy that had to have all the answers. I just was the guy that had a comforting place and a place that people wanted to come to. And I realized, I didn't leave the ministry at all. I'm still a pastor. I went from pastor to chef to pastor again. And I'm just nurturing people in a very different way now that feels congruent with what I understand faith to be. So in the process of 10 years, from 2007 to 2017, I opened and closed 3 restaurants. Not a good track record, not a good look. And in that time, my wife was diagnosed with cancer. I went bankrupt and then eventually found myself unemployed. My wife passed in November of 2019, which left me with no wife, no business, no job, and I didn't know what to do. So I followed my impulse and I started to travel. So a week after her funeral, I hit the open road because the 4 walls of the house here, they tell the same old stories. And I know that the open road tells me new ones, and I wanted to get out and find some. So I started traveling and ended up in Ireland in March of 2020, right about the same time that the international pandemic of COVID struck the world. And I was in Northern Ireland in a little pub called Finn McCool's, having my Guinness, fat and happy, and then Trump comes on the BBC and announces that Ireland has been added to the US travel ban. And my Irish host said, "We need to get you home." So we packed up, drove the 3 hours back down to Dublin, packed the rest of my things, got a few hours of sleep, got to the Dublin airport at 6 a.m. the next morning with every other European traveler, it seemed. It wasn't difficult getting the ticket changed, but it was difficult getting on the plane. So I come back and I'm just even more discouraged. I don't know what to do, and a little bit angry and a little bit sad and frustrated and all that. And in May of 20, some people who knew me from my restaurant days asked me if I would cook for them a meal for their 25th anniversary. They were supposed to be in London, and that obviously got canceled. And so I did. I made them a meal, 5 courses, 2 wines, but I boxed it up and I sent it over to their house. And a little something in me died. I didn't like doing that. I create experiences, not food. But they paid me nicely for it, and they were very grateful. But they took pictures and posted them, and the power of social media took over. And the very next day, requests start coming in. Kevin, would you do that for us? That looks beautiful. And as you remember, the whole world was shut down, and especially our industry of hospitality. No place to go, but people still had birthdays, anniversaries, special occasions, and they were pent up and longing to be out. So I refer to them as customer zero, the second customer that requested I cook for them. I said, yeah, I will do that, but I won't send it over to your house. Would you feel safe in my backyard? And they did. And so I refer to them, that's how it started, as customer zero, which then led into 38 dinners in my backyard, all during COVID. Not thinking, though, that this was going to turn into anything. I just thought, oh, that was a good way to get through COVID. So because all the dinners were outside, and October rolls around and weather changes and close up shop, and I thought, well, that was kind of fun. And then I started getting requests for the spring. Kevin, are you doing this again? Are you taking reservations yet? I want to bring my mom there. I want to have my anniversary there. And that's when I realized, okay, I think it's time to take this seriously. And so I met with some advisors, January 21, and we talked through what would it take to turn this little portico thing into a straight up business. We identified our holy trinity, which was the Department of Revenue, the Liquor Commission, and the Health Department. Those 3 entities, deities as we referred, had to be satisfied. And the first one, the Department of Revenue, was fairly straightforward. I just hired a bookkeeper, and he set me up on QuickBooks. We began to track expenses and got a sales tax permit and started handing all the people with their handout tax checks. So that was straightforward. The Liquor Commission was the easiest of the 3. And everybody says, really? Wow. And I called an investigator and I said, look, here's what I'm doing. It feels like I'm having friends over to my house, but I do it a whole lot, like several times a week. I cook for them and I serve them alcohol and they pay me for it. Do you have a problem with that? And they said, well, 1, we don't have jurisdiction over your home. Whatever you do in your home is private. And just so long as these gatherings are private. And there's a whole list of requirements of what does it mean to have a private gathering. And that's a set guest list and a certain other elements that I met. And so they said, no, you're good to go. Just make sure it's private. So that included, I don't have a website, so I know one can Google or find us right away, because putting a website out there makes it public. And the way we do our reservations, you have to be invited to come to this private dinner. And that's how we satisfy the Liquor Commission. The Health Department, that was a little trickier. They said, oh, you're making money off of food. That's a food business. Anytime you make money off of food, it's got to come out of an inspected facility. commercial kitchen. And I thought, oh, there went my little dream. And they were very helpful, very cooperative. They said, well, tell us what you're trying to do. So I gave them a menu. And they said, well, you just need these 5 basic things. You need a hand sink and a mop sink and a 3-bowl sink and scrubbable walls and surfaces and commercial grade appliances. And so all of those 5 things I was able to do by myself and my own sweat equity, and opened for business May 1st, 2021. And we're off and running. And for the first year we did 38 dinners. The second year we did 72 dinners. And then we did 92 dinners, and then over 100 the next year. And this little thing started to take off. And I realized, oh, I feel like I'm a chef again. Oh, I feel like I own a restaurant again. And these changes slowly began to fill me to realize, oh, all of that I had gone through has led me to this. And because now I'm in my home and I'm serving food in my home, both inside and outside, there is a vulnerability and an intimacy to what we do that people can feel. You can see it in their body language, people relaxing, and also, what is this? People just don't have a full category yet for what we are doing in the portico and at the chef's table. And I don't use this language, but you're being shepherded. You're being watched over. You're being cared for. And when's the last time you sat for 4 hours and let somebody take care of you with food and drink and care? Most restaurants will tell you you have 90 minutes or 120 minutes. You here in the portico, you have all night if you want, because we're not in a hurry and we don't require you to be either. But that's another way we nurture, and how Chef became pastor again. And I feel extremely fortunate to do this. And where's it going to go? I don't know, but I'm looking forward to the ride.